Imagine a world where the undisputed heavyweight champion of a sports league can be entirely dismantled by the absolute worst team in the competition.
Right, just completely taken apart.
Yeah, and not because of like a blown play or a sudden injury or anything like that, but simply because the universe blinked.
It's pure chaos.
Exactly. Today, we're looking at a sports schedule where fate is quite literally decided by the roll of the dice.
Which is such a wild concept when you really think about it.
It really is. So if you've ever looked at a spreadsheet and thought, there's a story hidden in here, well, this deep dive is for you. We're going to take you inside a document that, on its surface, looks like a totally dry administrative itinerary.
It really does masquerade as this purely utilitarian piece of paper. I mean, you glance at it and you just see team names, you see start times, stadium locations.
Just a list of chores, basically.
Yeah, exactly. It just tells you where to be and when to pay attention.
But we are actually looking at the preview sheet for AFT Dice Season 12.
A very specific moment in time.
Right. Specifically, we're zeroing in on the round 10 matchups, and those are scheduled for Monday, April 6, 2026.
Which is a huge day for this league.
Absolutely. And sitting right next to the standard list of 9 games are these incredibly cryptic numeric strings.
They look like typos, honestly.
They really do. But once you understand the mechanics driving those numbers, that boring itinerary transforms into an absolute thriller.
Okay, let's unpack this, because my first reaction to this document was to try and find the cipher.
Naturally, you want to crack the code.
Right. I'm looking at these matchups, and right next to a team like the Western Bulldogs, there is this sequence. It says 18-1-8-0.
Looking at these sequences feels like trying to crack a locker combination, doesn't it? What are we actually looking at here?
Well, it looks like an IP address at first glance, but that sequence is literally the architectural foundation of the entire league.
Oh, absolutely. Those numbers are a direct code for the standings and the team records.
So break that down for us. Sure, so if you're looking at this sheet with us, that Western Bulldogs example, the 18-1-8-0, it tells a very specific, a story of suffering, honestly.
A lot of suffering.
Because, since this is the round 10 preview, every team has played exactly 9 games.
Right, that makes sense.
So the sequence represents their ladder position, then wins, then losses, and finally draws.
Oh, I see. So it's perfectly chronological for their season.
Exactly. We can prove it mathematically, too. The Bulldogs have 1 win, 8 losses, and 0 draws.
And 1 + 8 + 0 = 9 games.
You got it. Therefore, that first number, the 18, is their position. They are dead last in an 18-team league.
Wow, so 18th place, that is grim.
It's very grim. But understanding this formula, it's the skeleton key for you to unlock the tension of every single matchup to come.
Because now we can actually read the stakes. But before we get into who is playing who, we need to talk about how this actually works.
Right, the mechanics of it all.
Because AFT stands for Australian Football Table Talk. Or at least it's a dice-based simulation that heavily mirrors Australian rules football.
Yeah, we aren't talking about athletes running out onto a physical field here.
No, definitely not. We are talking about probability, right?
Yeah.
Modifiers and variance.
Exactly. Because in a physical game, a team's athletic skill, their conditioning, real-time decision-making, all of that dictates the final score.
The human element.
Right. But in a simulated environment like AFT Dice, a team's real-world skill or historical dominance is translated into a statistical modifier.
Okay, so how does that look in practice?
So a powerhouse team might get a +2 or a +3 advantage added to whatever number they roll on a 20-sided die.
Oh, gotcha. So it represents their strategic superiority over the other team.
Exactly. It's baked into the math.
Which means they have a structural advantage, but not a guarantee.
Not at all.
Because if that top-tier team rolls a 1 and the team at the bottom of the ladder rolls a 20, that massive talent deficit is just erased by pure mathematical variance.
It vanishes.
Poof. It essentially quantifies the any given Sunday rule of sports.
That's a great way to put it. The upset isn't just possible. It's mathematically baked into the ecosystem.
Right, which makes it so exciting.
And if we connect this to the bigger picture, that tension between a team's underlying skill modifier and the chaotic reality of a dice roll, well, that's why humans project such intense narratives onto this format.
We just can't help ourselves.
We really can't. You have managers and fans emotionally investing in polyhedrons. The dice become these impartial, sometimes cruel arbiters of fate.
Very cruel sometimes.
Yeah. And understanding that mechanic that a superior strategy can be entirely undone by a cold streak of plastic hitting a table, that is the lens through which we have to view this entire round 10 schedule.
Which naturally brings us to the extremes of this document. Because if you scan the matchups, the disparities are just glaring.
Oh, they jump right off the page.
They really do. We have Richmond sitting comfortably at number 1 on the ladder. Their code is 1-7-2-0.
So 7 wins, 2 losses, a phenomenal run so far.
Yeah, they are dominating. And they are hosting the Sydney Swans at the MCG. But the Swans are sitting way down at 14th with a 4-5 record.
Quite the gap there.
Huge gap. And then you look over at Adelaide Oval, where the Adelaide Crows, who are number 2 on the ladder with 6 wins and 3 losses, they're hosting Carlton.
And Carlton is hovering down at 15th, right?
Exactly. Those are massive divides in performance metrics.
You have the literal titans of Season 12 taking on teams that are just struggling to find any sort of statistical rhythm.
But I have to push back on how we interpret these so-called mismatches, especially based on the mechanics we just discussed.
Okay, lay it on me.
Well, in a traditional sport, pitting the number 1 seed against the 14th ranked team is usually a foregone conclusion.
Right, you'd bet the house on the number 1 seed.
Exactly. It's like pitting a straight-A university student against someone who barely shows up to class. The underlying knowledge gap is just too wide.
The straight-A student wins every time.
Right. But in AFT Dice, does a 14th ranked team genuinely sweat a matchup against the number 1 seed? I mean, really?
Well, they absolutely sweat it, but they don't despair over it. And I think that is the crucial difference here.
Okay, tell me more about that.
So Richmond's 7-2 record suggests their team sheet is loaded with highly favorable modifiers.
Right. They have the big +3s or whatever.
Exactly. They have built an engine that consistently generates high simulated scores. But when the dice hit the table at the MCG, that straight-A student still has to take the test.
And the test questions are randomized every single time.
Precisely. The underlying tension here is that dominance in AFT Dice is incredibly fragile.
It's resting on a knife's edge.
It really is.
Yeah.
Sydney knows that if they can just spike a few high rolls early on, they can neutralize Richmond's strategic advantage entirely.
Wow. It makes those Goliath versus underdog games feel incredibly precarious for the favorite, doesn't it?
It has to be nerve-wracking for the managers.
Seriously. You aren't just playing the opponent, you're playing the law of averages.
Yes. But if we want to talk about a game where the modifiers and the averages are completely balanced, we have to look at the absolute blockbuster of round 10.
Oh, I know exactly which one you mean. North Melbourne taking on the West Coast Eagles at Marvel Stadium.
Yes. That is the defining match of the round.
I'm looking at their numeric strings right now, and they are literal mirror images.
It's uncanny.
North Melbourne's code is 3-6-3-0. West Coast code is 4-6-3-0.
So they're sitting in 3rd and 4th place on the ladder.
Yep, with identical records of 6 wins and 3 losses. They are statistically tied.
Separated only by some invisible tiebreaker, like maybe a percentage of simulated points scored across their first 9 games.
Right, so this isn't Goliath versus David. This is 2 heavyweights colliding to see who actually belongs in that top tier.
And statistically, matches between equally matched teams with identical records at a halfway point of a season, those are the pivot points that define championships.
It's the make-or-break moment.
Absolutely. The winner of this game doesn't just notch a 7th victory, they break a psychological and statistical deadlock.
They force the other team down the ladder.
Yes, securing undeniable superiority within that elite top 4. In a game of dice, when 2 teams have proven they can navigate the variance equally well over 9 weeks, a head-to-head matchup just strips away all the excuses.
Oh, completely. The loser of that match falls right back into the churning waters of the rest of the league.
And those waters are rough right now.
Which brings us to my favorite part. Here's where it gets really interesting. Because right beneath those top 4 teams, there is an absolute chaotic bottleneck.
The middle of the pack.
Yeah. We've talked about the extremes at the top, and we know the Bulldogs are suffering at the bottom. But when you look at the middle of this data set, the margins don't just shrink, they practically disappear.
It is the ultimate mid-table logjam. In any competitive structure, but particularly in a simulated one, the middle of the pack is the most dangerous place to exist.
It's like a game of musical chairs where the music stops every single time the dice hit the table.
That's exactly it. One bad roll, and you simply don't have a seat in the top tier.
Look at the sheer density here. Positions 6 through 9, that's Collingwood, Gold Coast, Essendon, and Port Adelaide, they all have the exact same record of 5 wins and 4 losses.
Just stacked on top of each other.
Yeah. And right below them, positions 10 through 15, which includes GWS, Brisbane, Melbourne, Geelong, Sydney, and Carlton, they all have exactly 4 wins.
What's fascinating here is the sheer gravity of that grouping. I mean, in an 18-team league, 10 of those teams, more than half the entire competition, are separated by a single victory.
A single win. That is wild.
It is an unprecedented level of parity for a league that is already halfway through its season.
So what does this all mean for a team's strategy going into round 10? Because when you look at a matchup like the Brisbane Lions, who are 11th with a 4-5 record, taking on the Gold Coast Suns, who are 7th with a 5-4 record, the stakes seem astronomical.
Oh, they are through the roof.
They are playing at the Gabba, and if Brisbane wins, they immediately neutralize Gold Coast's advantage.
Right, they tie their win record and just drag them down into the mud.
Exactly. Or consider Port Adelaide in 9th place hosting Melbourne in 12th at Adelaide Oval.
Another crucial game.
Port Adelaide has 5 wins, Melbourne has 4. A win for Melbourne mathematically bridges that gap entirely.
They erase the difference between being ranked 9th and being ranked 12th in a single afternoon of dice rolling.
It's incredible.
And the strategic implication of that is that conservatism just goes out the window. When you are stuck in a 10-team logjam, playing defensively or relying on safe, low-variance modifiers, well, it won't help you climb.
You can't just play it safe.
No, you have to take massive risks to break out of the pack.
Because if you don't take the risk, the teams around you definitely will.
Exactly.
If you're sitting in 6th place with 5 wins and you have an unlucky afternoon where the dice just run cold, you don't just drop to 7th.
Oh no, it's a free fall.
Right. If the teams below you spike a win, you could mathematically plummet from 6th place all the way down to 14th place by the end of Monday. The floor can literally fall out from under half the league in a matter of hours.
It creates this environment of extreme, compounded volatility. The psychological weight of the mid-table is just profound.
I can't even imagine the stress.
Right. When you are at the very top, like Richmond, you have a buffer. You can afford an unlikely loss to the Sydney Swans because your 7 wins insulate you.
Yeah, you have a cushion.
And when you are at the absolute bottom, like the Bulldogs, the pressure is arguably off. I mean, you are just playing for pride at that point, hoping for some statistical regression to the mean to grant you a second victory.
There's almost a strange comfort in hitting rock bottom, you know? The only way the numbers can move is up.
Exactly. But in the middle, in positions 6 through 15, you are playing on the edge of a mathematical cliff.
A sheer drop.
Every single roll dictates whether you break into the elite top half or slide down into the bottom tier. There is zero buffer.
Not at all.
And because half the league is stuck in this specific bottleneck, the entire landscape of the AFT Dice Season 12 ladder is guaranteed to look completely different by Tuesday morning.
The logjam just cannot mathematically sustain itself.
No, round 10 is the battering ram that will break it apart.
So as I'm parsing these win-loss-draw numbers to see how that logjam might break, I notice something that completely disrupts the math.
Ooh, what's that?
Almost every team has a 0 in that final column. No draws.
Right, very standard.
Except for 2 glaring anomalies. I'm looking at Hawthorn's record in 5th place, and their code is 5-5-3-1, 5 wins, 3 losses, 1 draw.
Ah, yes, the elusive one.
And the GWS Giants, sitting in 10th place, are 10-4-4-1, 4 wins, 4 losses, 1 draw.
It really jumps out at you.
It does. If this is a dice game driven by variance, rolling an exact mathematical tie with an opponent must be a statistical nightmare. How does the system even handle that?
Well, this raises a really important question about how sophisticated the AFT simulation actually is.
Okay, yeah.
Because in physical sports, particularly Australian rules football, which this is models on, a draw is a notoriously rare and often deflating outcome.
Yeah, you play for 2 hours and literally nobody wins.
It's exhausting. But in a dice simulation, a draw means that after dozens of rolls, after applying all the distinct team modifiers, and after navigating the massive variance of a 20-sided die, the 2 teams produced perfectly, mathematically identical outputs.
That is insane. It's like rolling a handful of dice 50 times. Your opponent does the exact same thing with different dice, and you both land on the exact same total sum at the very end.
Yes. The probability of the math aligning that perfectly is just microscopic.
It's a severe statistical anomaly.
It is. And it has massive implications for navigating that mid-table bottleneck we just talked about.
Really? How so?
Because in these league structures, a draw usually awards partial points, often half the points of a standard win.
Oh, I see where this is going.
This is precisely why Hawthorn is sitting uniquely at 5 wins and 1 draw. That single, highly improbable draw acts as a tiny, highly unique buffer.
Wow.
It puts them slightly ahead of that massive 5-win logjam in 6th through 9th place, but leaves them just behind the 6-win leaders in the top 4.
So that draw is literally keeping their head above the churning water of the mid-table.
Exactly. It's fascinating how a mathematical fluke from earlier in the season is dictating their current survival.
That is so cool. And because the mid-table is so volatile, the physical location of where these dice rolls are happening starts to act like a pressure cooker, which brings us to a massive geographic anomaly on this schedule.
Let me guess.
Marvel Stadium.
Ah, yes. The Marvel Stadium Marathon.
It is a marathon. We have 9 games in this round. 1 is at the MCG, 2 are at Adelaide Oval, 1 at the Gabba, 1 at GMHBA Stadium. They are totally spread out across the country.
Normal scheduling stuff.
Right. But Marvel Stadium is hosting 4 separate matches in this single round.
4 games in one day.
You have Hawthorn versus Collingwood, the Western Bulldogs desperately fighting Essendon, that massive top 4 clash between North Melbourne and West Coast, and finally, St Kilda versus Fremantle. 4 games assigned to one building.
It transforms Marvel Stadium into the undisputed hub of chaos for round 10.
Absolutely.
And we really have to talk about the narrative weight of that St Kilda versus Fremantle game.
The basement dwellers.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Because while North Melbourne and West Coast are fighting for supremacy at the top of the ladder, St Kilda and Fremantle are fighting for pure survival at the bottom.
It is the Desperation Bowl.
That's the perfect name for it.
St Kilda is ranked 17th with only 2 wins. Fremantle is ranked 16th with only 3 wins. For either of them to salvage Season 12 and avoid joining the Bulldogs in the absolute basement, a win at Marvel Stadium is completely non-negotiable.
It's do or die. And what's brilliant about this specific piece of scheduling is how it mirrors the constraints of real-world sports.
How do you mean?
Well, even though we know this is a game of dice, I mean, it could theoretically be played on a spreadsheet or a digital message board, right?
Yeah, you don't actually need a stadium.
Exactly. But the simulation forces these games into physical venues.
Yeah.
It creates a narrative anchor.
Oh, I love that. Let's visualize that for a second. If you treat this like a massive tabletop gaming convention, Marvel Stadium is basically hosting half the entire league on April 6th.
It's a wall-to-wall tension.
You have the desperate teams fighting off relegation. You have the top-tier heavyweights trying to break a 6-win tie. You have the mid-table scrappers trying to escape the bottleneck. And you have the last-place Bulldogs all walking through the same doors.
The sheer noise of the dice rolling in that one location would be deafening.
Clattering everywhere.
The concentration of fate happening under that one virtual roof is staggering. Whether it's simulated or physical, having 4 critical matchups in one location fundamentally alters the atmosphere of the season.
It becomes an event.
Yes. If you are following AFT Dice Season 12, every single notification on your phone on April 6th is going to be coming out of Marvel Stadium. It is the focal point where the logjams will break and the ladder will be completely rewritten.
And this is exactly why dissecting a single, seemingly utilitarian sheet of paper is so rewarding.
It's never just a piece of paper.
Never. We started with what looked like a random assortment of cryptic numbers and stadium names, but by simply understanding the formatting, ladder position, wins, losses, draws, and understanding the mechanics of how chance collides with strategy, we've mapped out an incredibly vibrant ecosystem.
We really did. We uncovered a fiercely competitive AFT Dice Season 12.
We've got a dominant Richmond trying to hold off the ruthless variants of the dice against the Swans. We've mapped out a terrifying mid-table bottleneck where 10 teams are fighting tooth and nail over a single victory to avoid free-falling down the rankings.
The stakes are just massive.
Huge. We found those elusive, mathematically beautiful draws keeping teams like Hawthorn afloat. And we discovered the Marvel Stadium Marathon, where half the league's destiny will be decided in a single day.
It's going to be a bloodbath. And for you, as you encounter dense information in your own life, I think there is a profound practical lesson here.
Oh, definitely.
Data is never just numbers resting statically on a page. Whether you are looking at sports statistics, business analytics, financial reports, or just a seemingly boring weekly schedule, the human stories, the underlying tension, and the real-world stakes are always buried in the formatting.
You just have to know how to look for it.
Exactly. Spotting the log jams, finding the anomalies like those rare draws, and understanding the mechanics behind the metrics, that gives you the true story. You just have to be willing to sit with the data long enough to read the code.
You have to find the mechanics driving the numbers.
Always.
And speaking of those mechanics, here is a final thought to leave you with as we wrap up this deep dive.
All right, what do you have for us?
We know exactly where these 18 teams stand after 9 rounds. The numbers are incredibly precise. But it begs a fascinating psychological question.
Okay, I'm listening.
In a game driven by the literal physical roll of the dice, how much of the Western Bulldogs' 1-win, 8-loss record is genuinely poor strategy, and how much is just catastrophic, undeniable bad luck?
Oh, that is the ultimate question.
When you know your fate is ultimately in the hands of polyhedrons and probability, does losing a game by a single unlucky roll make that loss easier to swallow because it wasn't your fault? Or does the sheer randomness make it infinitely more infuriating?